students, in this video we are going to learn Vision Current Affairs September month, and our first topic is social accountability. We will now discuss upon first chapter, polity and governance. First topic is social accountability. Now here, actually Rajasthan state has made a campaign for demanding social accountability bill to be passed in the next assembly session. So in that aspect, social accountability topic has come. Now here, what is social accountability? It is being responsible by checking up the activities of the public officials. It may be government officials or maybe the legislatures, that is MLAs, MPs and all the leaders, political leaders out there. So to check and to make them accountable, this social accountability has come up. So the tools of this social accountability are participatory budgeting, that is making people involving in their budget priorities, that is giving citizens voice to their budget priorities from the local level itself. So this type of tool is implemented in Gujarat. And next tool is participatory planning. Participatory planning means in planning and designing of government programs, the beneficiaries, that is who have already took one of the benefits of the scheme, are involved in the government planning. Why? Because if they are inquire, if the government involves them, they will come up with the problems they have found while they are going through that scheme. That may be a double bedroom flat that is under PM Awas Yojana, people will be getting free house. So in that strategy, in that plan, if there are any problems, the government officials will talk to them and they will make a plan and for the next scheme, so that the mistakes which were done in the previous scheme will not be repeated again. So for that purpose, participatory planning has come up, and this is implemented in Kerala. The third tool is public expenditure tracking. This is very important because there are a lot of corruptions involved in budget, and people should get involved to track this public expenditure. Now, what is this public expenditure? It is a budget granted for different sectors for their development. It may be for Gram Sabha, it may be for textile industries, it may be for farmers, it may be for transportation, anything. The budget should be tracked. And one of the example is low quality of roads will be laid down. So how much budget is allocated, what is the quality of that roads, what are the quality of the government services should be also tracked, and that can be done through public expenditure tracking, because there are few intermediaries who take huge amount and do the project for very less amount. So that should be tracked, and for that people should be involved, because it is a democratic state and people is the ultimate power. So this public expenditure tracking is in practice in Delhi and Rajasthan. Now the fourth is citizen report card. It is like giving a feedback to the government projects and quality of their services. This is implemented in Bangalore and Maharashtra. And now community scorecards. These are also same like citizen report cards. They'll community wise, there will be a progress report type which are based on the projects and government performances and also their services. It is implemented in Maharashtra and Andhra Pradesh. Now this social audit, one of the tool of social accountability, is very important one, because here the government officials and the people will be there at a single stage, and the problems of the people will be presented. That is like a public hearing the discussions of the problems, how the solutions should be implemented. All those are discussed under one platform through public hearing, and that is social audit. It is till now not in practice in any of the states, and this is one of the important, and it should be implemented, because there should be a platform for the people to tell their problems. What are the situations and what are the negative aspects which have resulted on them due to lack of governance. So social audit is one of the very important tool, and for achieving complete social accountability in a state, social audit plays a very important role. And now the last one is citizen charter. Citizen charter is informing the citizens about the service entitlements. For example, if a CM want to build a dam, so he will make a document form and then he will release out, so that people are informed that how much budget, what is the plan of the dam, everything is noted by the people. So everything is informed to the people. So in that process is called citizen charter, and Andhra Pradesh and Karnataka have implemented this type of social accountability. So now here, what is the need of social accountability? The first thing is to improve governance so that people are benefited. And the second, it empowers citizens by making them aware of their rights and their right to question the authority if anything goes wrong. This is citizen empowerment. And this is to eradicate, that is to compensate for limitations of traditional mechanism. That means to eradicate the practices of bias, corruption, etc. Because we are even hearing that government question papers are leaking, and government officials, we can see government posts can be bought for around 10 lakhs or 20 lakhs. All these news we can see in the newspapers. So that is one of the example of this point. So to eradicate, to counter that limitations, even in election process there are frauds. So for that aspects, that is, these are all traditional mechanisms like election frauds, governmental jobs frauds, corruption, funding frauds, everything are traditional mechanisms, and to eradicate that processes, social accountability is needed. So we'll revise again. The need for social accountability is to eradicate the practice of bias, corruption, etc., and to improve governance so that people are benefited. It is under improved governance. And for citizens empowerment, it is like to empower citizens by making them aware of their rights and the right to question the authority if anything goes wrong. That can be only achieved if there is awareness among the people, and if they know that our country is a democratic country and no other power is high as public. So now we'll learn about the challenges and vulnerabilities inherent to social accountability. So here, first is resistance to reform. That is, reform here means change. So people, generally the government officials itself withhold some of the crucial information. Like if the people come and ask the government officials about the budget and what is the process about the budget, how much amount is allocated for their village, some people who are corrupt try to provide unnecessary information and withhold crucial information. That process is resistance to reform. Even the government officials doesn't let people to be social accountable. That is one of the challenge. The second is complacency on part of citizens. Complacency here means keeping calm. Citizens might be aware of the local leader or the local goons who support the leader. If the citizens come out against the social leader who is corrupt, then their life might be at risk. So for that aspect, people keep calm to when the question of social accountability comes in their area. So that is one of the example of complacency on part of citizens. Complacency means keeping calm. So this can result in citizens not speaking up against corruption and refusing to cooperate in social accountability efforts. And the next is disruption by powerful vested interests. That is threats and coercion. The meaning of coercion is forcing people to agree not to participate in social accountability. That is coercion. Threats. If anybody comes against a leader, that family will get continuous threats and threat calls. So this is one of the examples of disruption by powerful vested interests. And this results in the communities rejecting to participate in social accountability initiatives. And because the citizens have no power and have no support, they don't generally come out and participate in social accountability initiatives. And there is no choice for them to turn against corruption or a corrupt leader. This is disruption by powerful vested interests. So now the last challenge is lack of effective grievance redressal. Here grievance redressal means day-to-day checkup of their public activities, day-to-day solving the problems and being accountable to the citizens. So effective grievance redressal is lacking is in one of the challenge of social accountability. See, for example, a public official implements a scheme and he doesn't check up even though the scheme is working or not correctly, and even though how many people are applied, what are the actions to forward that scheme. So if they I'll take another example. Lack of effective grievance redressal. See, if public official continuously support social accountability, there will be no problem. But if the public official itself is not effective on his grievance redressal, that is frequently following up actions on social accountability, if he is not doing that, then there might be the risk to the people who participate in social accountability. So for that reason, this might be one of the challenge of social accountability. So lack of effective grievance redressal is also one of the challenge of social accountability, because the authorities should check day-to-day reports upon social accountability. If they lack it, ultimately the people will suffer. So now, imperatives for sound social accountability law. Here, imperatives means the actions. So the actions that should be taken for a good social accountability law. So now, first is effective decentralization. Effective decentralization can be implemented to principle of subsidiarity. Now, what is this subsidiarity? This says the action which can be better executed at local level must be executed at local level. So anything which will be 100% implemented in local level should be implemented at any cost at the local level. For example, water management and using of natural manure for agriculture, that can be affected 100% in local levels, right? So that land will also not degrade and there will be huge productivity on farms, and organic farming at the end of the day will improve. So principle of subsidiarity is one of the important program of effective decentralization. Now, information and awareness. So information and awareness, generally we have read in the previous challenge, it is resistance to reform. That is, public officials will try to withhold the information and provide inadequate information which is not required for the citizens. If they want to track a budget, they will not provide that budget for their village. They will provide something or the other which is not even similar. So for that, under right to, if we strengthen the information and awareness program by strengthening section 4 of RTI, we can achieve social accountability. Now, what is section 4 of RTI? It is suo motu disclosure of information by each public authority. That is section 4 of RTI. So now the next is capacity building and community mobilization. Community mobilization means forming a group of people and fighting for a specific goal. That is community mobilization. And capacity building means making people aware of their capacity, aware of their rights, aware of their authorities. And still, even though we achieved after 75 years of independence, even it is a democratic country, but still people think that they are below the public officials. Public officials are the servants of people, but people don't think that public officials are their servants. So capacity building is very much important. People should know, people must be aware of their rights. So capacity building should be there, and community mobilization. That is, we have a quotation, right? Unity wins. If people fight, maybe the farm laws in the recent time, farm laws were repealed, right? So all the farmers fought for 1 year. That is, they know what are the advantages and disadvantages of that farm bills. So that all people, or all group of people coming together and fighting against a similar problem, the same problem, to achieve it, community mobilization is very much important. So this is also one of the actions that is required to achieve social accountability. And the next is making social accountability mandatory in program guidelines. So what is this? For every scheme, at least one social accountability tool must be implemented. That is the meaning of this statement. That is making social accountability mandatory in program guidelines. And the last one is grievance redressal. Grievance redressal means effective checking and effectively addressing the issues of the problems is called grievance redressal. So by setting up online portals, the problems can be sorted out, and they should also have a detailed code of conduct for complaints reserved. Helplines also should be provided. Okay, some of the success stories are People's Campaign for Decentralized Planning in Kerala. It was successful by involving SCs, STs and women in their People's Plan campaign. Now, what is this People's Plan campaign? Okay, we'll study here. We have our next topic is that only. And the second success story is Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangatam. Rajasthan based organization employed social audits. What is the social audits? It is providing a platform for public hearing. Government officials also will be present there along with people, so their problems can be sorted out. So this is one of the success story. and MGNREGA, Mahatma Gandhi National Rural Employment Generation Act. It is one of the scheme and it has been conducted from several years, and this has empowered the panchayats and to remove poverty in India. This is one of the tool which has played a prominent role to eradicate, at least to some extent, the poverty. It provides 90 to 95 days of work for the unemployed youth of the rural India. So our next topic is People's Plan campaign. Now actually Union government launched People's Plan campaign 2021, Sabka Yojana, Sabka Vikas and Vibrant Gram Sabha Dashboard. Now we will study one by one about People's Plan campaign. So this People's Plan campaign has been launched by Ministry of Panchayat Raj. So now here People's Plan campaign means preparing Gram Panchayat development program in a campaign mode. So by see here, People's Plan campaign is preparing a budget for their panchayat areas at the local level for the financial year 2022 to 2023, involving women, SC/ST and other backward sections of the society in the Gram Sabha meetings. And what does this People's Plan campaign aims? It aims to strengthen elected representatives of panchayats and self-help groups, because under this the People Plan campaign will be conducted. So they strengthen this People's Plan panchayats and self-help group women's under Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, and NRLM is National Rural Livelihood Mission. So see here, these are numericals. 31.65 lakh panchayat representatives are there across India, and among them 14.53 lakh are women. So now here we will learn about this Deen Dayal Antyodaya Yojana, National Rural Livelihood Mission. It is launched by Ministry of Rural Development in 2011, and this is one of the poverty relief program like MGNREGA. Okay, this is the process of creation of Gram Panchayat Development Program. PPC means People's Plan campaign over here, and it is coordinated by Panchayat Raj Department at state level. And now the process is, first they will commence PPC, and then Gram Sabha meetings will be there. The discussions will be approved in this GPDP portal, that is Gram Panchayat Development Program portal, and Mission Antyodaya survey verification. Mission Antyodaya is poverty elimination program. So under this they will verify that, and from eGram Swaraj application they create some of the activities, and next plan will be approved in eGram Swaraj, and next they implement the activities and they report on expenditure on activities. This is a general process of Gram Panchayat Development Program. And now we'll learn about its importance. So first we will look at this significance of decentralized planning. First is direct accountability of local government, that is being responsible. Here promoting economy and efficiency. This is one development process, and capturing local needs. It is like providing water, transportation, and what are the basic requirements for that people. Tapping of local potential. See, providing necessary resources which will be useful for the people, and developing in agricultural sector or whatever the famous is in the village. So if they are in famous in providing textiles, good quality of textiles, they'll under this they'll encourage. The ultimate aim is for economic development. And here it is next is enhanced understanding of development by citizens. And next is better bond between panchayats and local citizens. Next one is enhanced local resource mobilization. And the last is responsive governance. So here its importance is under Article 243G. What does Article 243G states? It is people of panchayat area can prepare plans for economic and social justice. This is under the Article 243G. So this Gram Panchayat development plan provides vision for them, sets out goals, and gives an action plan to reach their goals. And the next is comprehensive and based on participatory. Okay, it will be like participatory process will be involved. Every section of the society will be involved for their planning. And here 29 subjects are listed in 11th schedule, and under this the schemes will be related to this 29 subjects. And what are these 29 subjects be like? It will be like agriculture, land reforms, animal husbandry, dairying, poultry, fisheries, social forestry, farm forestry, etc. All these are related to 29 subjects listed in 11th schedule of Constitution. Okay, I'll repeat it once again. First is Article 243G provides the Gram Sabha people or the local body people to prepare plans for economic development and social justice. This Gram Panchayat development plan provides vision for them, sets out goals for them, and also implements the action plan to reach their goals. And the next important thing is the Gram Sabha people will relate their plan to 29 subject listed in 11th schedule. That is agriculture, land reforms, animal husbandry, dairying, poultry, fisheries, soil forestry, farm forestry. All these come under 29 subject listed in 11th schedule of Constitution. And the third is effective implementation of flagship schemes. Fourth is Ministry of Panchayat prepares model guidelines to achieve the targets which are fixed by Gram Panchayat development plan. So now here, what is this Gram Sabha dashboard? Gram Sabha dashboard is the dashboard which help in increasing the maximum participation. It checks out the participants, and through Gram Sabhas, standing committee, meetings of Gram Panchayat, meeting of elected Panchayat public representatives throughout the year. So now the next topic is Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha. So this is in the news because Delhi High Court asked the Lok Sabha Secretariat why there is a vacancy in the post of Deputy Speaker for 2 years. In that aspect, this Deputy Speaker of Lok Sabha has been coming in the news. So we'll learn more about this deputy speaker and his elections. Actually, the speaker and the deputy speaker are presiding officers of Lok Sabha. Presiding officers means who presides over the meeting of Lok Sabha. So, if the speaker is vacant or during the absence of the speaker, the deputy speaker performs the duties of the speaker. So, under Article 94, what it states is if the speaker should resign by giving the letter of resignation to the deputy speaker. So for that, deputy speaker is important. Under Article 93, the House of People shall as soon as may be choose 2 members of the House to be respectively speaker and deputy speaker. And so often as the office of the speaker and deputy speaker becomes vacant, the House shall choose another member to be speaker or deputy speaker as the case may be. So what does this means? If there is a vacancy in speaker post or deputy speaker post, they should be choose them as soon as possible when they attend the next sitting in Lok Sabha. Then only Article 93 prevails. But what has happened in this case? It has been 2 years, but still there is no speaker and there is no deputy speaker in that government. So now here under Article 93 itself, the elections of the speaker will be election date of the speaker will be fixed by the president, and the election date of the deputy speaker will be fixed by the speaker. So here, as per our case, in this aspect, deputy speaker election has been not conducted since 2 years. So it is fault in speaker, right? Because speaker has to fix the date of his elections. He did not fix. So now let us learn some of the reasons why it was been vacant for 2 years. So why the office has been vacant? So we have missed out this one. Rules of procedure and conduct of business in Lok Sabha and the deputy speaker. So what does this mean? Rule 8. Rule 8 states that this is only applicable to Lok Sabha and Rajya Sabha and deputy speaker. Even rules of procedure is applicable to conduct of business in Lok Sabha. So in the deputy speaker aspect, Rule 8 states that the speaker has to fix a date for holding the deputy speaker. This is same like Article 93. Now Rule 9 states that it provides 10-member panel of chairmen nominated by speaker to preside over the house in the absence of speaker and deputy speaker. So there is a vacancy from last 2 years. That means Rule 9 is implemented in that state. That means for 2 years the deputy speaker position is handled by this panel of chairmen. But what is the negative aspect from this? It is the duties of them are limited. If the deputy speaker is directly elected, he can perform much more duties than this panel of chairpersons. So that is one of the negative aspects of Rule 9 in this case. So now, why the office remained vacant? See, from 17th Lok Sabha, so for 17th Lok Sabha, the date of election for deputy speaker is pending even after 2 years. So actually from Morarji Desai government, he is the prime minister from BJP government. From this government, deputy speaker is chosen from the biggest opposition party, so that they can maintain a democratic form of situation in Lok Sabha. So like there were some conventions continue with parliamentary conventions, and there was no perfect biggest opposition party in them, and there were no settlements to elect the deputy speaker. For those reasons, the office of the deputy speaker has been vacant. So now the next topic is Amendment in All India Services Conduct Rules 1968. Here it states that if any gifts are given by the foreign dignitaries under this All India Services Conduct Rules, they have to give or report to the government if its value exceeds rupees 25,000. So they should not accept it. Even family and personal weddings, these are exceptional. Even here, if it is exceeding 25,000 rupees, then they have to report. So now what this amendment in All India Services has done was, it has repealed all these things, and now they can accept any gift which is provided from any person. This is the main change in this amendment in All India Services Conduct Rules 1968. Now the next topic is Prime Minister's Citizen Assistance and Relief in Emergency Situations, that is PM CARES Fund. We know that many people have donated in PM CARES Fund to help or sort out the problems of COVID affected people, and even after the pandemic also many people have donated, and PM CARES Fund is in use. Now this PM CARES Fund is not a government fund. That means it will be not made in the Consolidated Fund of India. Consolidated Fund of India is the public money. This fund is, the public money is stored in this Consolidated Fund of India, and from this itself the projects, government programs, the money for those all things will be given. So what does this first statement say is, PM CARES Fund will be not come under Consolidated Fund of India. And next is, Prime Minister is the ex officio chairman of PM CARES Fund. Now what is the ex officio means? It is giving position based on their power. As he is a Prime Minister, so he is appointed as the chairman of PM CARES Fund. And the other members are Minister of Defence, Minister of Home Affairs, Minister of Finance, Government of India. These are all ex officio trustees of the fund. And the next topic is, an institution's right to government aid is not a fundamental right. Supreme Court. So under Article 30, people have, the institution will be aided, and there will be no difference shown between minority and non-minority one. And Article 30 Clause 2 states that the state shall not, in granting aid to educational institutions, discriminate against any educational institutions on grounds of minority, religion or language. So what is the matter? In the Uttar Pradesh, the state-run institutions have demanded to grant a budget, or to grant aid from the government. They have demanded in the sense that it is their fundamental right, because Article 30 comes under fundamental right. But the court said that demanding for aid from the government is not a fundamental right. This is a core concept of this topic. So this is enough. And now next is Meghalaya Enterprise Architecture Project, MEGIA, launched. So now it has launched under Indian Enterprise Architecture. What is this India Enterprise Architecture? It is The traditional works like filling applications, filling, providing licenses, getting any other cards might be in traditional way. We have to go there and we have to collect. But under this India in enterprise architecture, this is converted into digital form, and we can get in less period of time. So this is launched under Ministry of Electronics and Information Technology. So it is parallel to all governments and their agencies across India. And the first state to implement this is Meghalaya. For that reason, it is called Meghya. That is Meghalaya Enterprise Architecture Project. Now it is spread under 6 pillars. One is governance, human resource, entrepreneurship, primary sector, infrastructure, and environment. So from traditional, this whole system transforms from traditional service to digital service. That's it. And it consists of business, application, data, technology, performance, security, integration, and architecture governance.